This is Athletes as Educators with former pro basketball player, championship winning coach, and author Angela R. Lewis. Angie Lewis interviews current and former athletes who are passionate about sharing the lessons they've learned and the experiences that have shaped their lives. A resource for parents, a guide for student athletes, a source for current and former athletes, keys to transition off the court. Welcome to the Athletes as Educators podcast with Angela R. Lewis.
Welcome to this episode of Athletes as Educators. I'm your host, Angie Lewis. On the podcast today, we have Megan Hughes Perry. Megan played college basketball at Cornell University. She works for the NBA, is in her 8th season, and then she helps the WNBA and is responsible for scouting top college prospects in preparation for the WNBA Draft. She's even done some analyst work with CBS Sports, ESPN3, Big East Digital Network. Megan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Angie, thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Megan, will you talk a little bit about your role now and how you got to this point? I mean, it sounds like a really cool job.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spend a lot of time talking to people about really the concept of basketball and sports being in my blood. From the time that I was a little girl, I was very involved and heavily ingrained in the game through different grassroots things like, AAU basketball, camps. I played, high school basketball and then college basketball. And I always knew my goal when I was younger was that I wanted to play at the highest level possible. And then also was very serious about my work in the classroom, and I wanted to compete in the classroom at the highest level possible. So I actually took an extra year of high school and went to a prep school, not for even academic reasons, but I wanted more time and more exposure and to find a program that I felt was a better fit for me. And I actually think that extra year helped me tremendously. I attended St. Anne's Belfield Prep School, which is a very small school in Charlottesville, Virginia. But in my time there, the 2 years that I spent there, my junior and senior year, we won back-to-back state championships, and I got a lot more exposure on the college circuit over the summer playing, and wound up having the opportunity to choose from a number of different Ivy League schools, which was new to me. That's not something I actually considered myself for earlier, but through playing basketball, I realized that's a possibility for me. And I took Cornell up on the offer. And that's actually how I got to Ithaca, New York. And through just playing basketball and being exposed to different women in athletics, I saw my coach and different administrators in the athletic department. I became curious about what they do. And I took that to a different level. I was like, well, this is what they do in college, but what do people do professionally?
Right.
And I actually had a really good friend of mine intern at the NBA, I think the summer of his junior year. He came back and he was telling me all about it. And I'm like, that sounds like an awesome opportunity. And he's like, yeah, I worked on some WNBA projects. You'd be a good fit for it. You should apply for this thing called the Associates Program. And that's a program for recent college graduates. You apply for it at the NBA, highly competitive. But I came in and interviewed, had a couple phone interviews, and I remember flying to New York on a game day, like in mid-February, like early in the morning, going through interviews for about 5 hours, hopping on a plane, flying back to Ithaca, and playing a game. I made it in time for halftime that evening. And a couple of months later, I got a phone call that I was part of the associate program, and I have been part of the NBA ever since. That's my path. That's my story.
That's pretty fascinating, though, that you left on a game day for your interview and came back in the middle of the game. What?
I did. It's kind of funny when I look back on it now, and playing college athletics, game day is a serious time. Like coaches aren't up for the best on game days, so missing shoot around was a big deal. Not being there for pregame meal. And then just, not being there for the game, my teammates understood it was a tremendous opportunity, and they always encouraged, success off the court. And so they were kind enough to allow me the opportunity to do that. I didn't have to choose, and we won the game. Hey, we won the game, so it worked out.
That's pretty awesome that it all worked out and that you were willing to take an opportunity and do something that you wanted to do. When you think back about all of the basketball that you've played over your life, what has been your most memorable moment?
Wow. My most memorable moment is probably, that's really tough. Do I have to choose one? Can I choose two?
Not at all. We'll go with two. Let's go with two.
I'm going to try to, I'll share two. The first one was actually one of my biggest challenges. I remember playing summer AAU basketball at a really big camp, big exposure camp, a lot of college coaches in the stands. And I remember specifically being in front of Dawn Staley. At the time, I remember she was seated courtside of this game. And so I was so excited. Dawn Staley was one of my idols when I was little. And this was a game that I started out playing really well. And then long story short, I wound up going for a loose ball, getting my legs tangled amongst some other athletes' legs, going for a loose ball out of bounds, tripped, fell, and wound up breaking my leg, like there in front of everyone. I mean, it was a horrible experience. I hadn't had any serious injuries up to that point in my career. And it was tough because, I lost a lot of opportunities from some larger name schools at that time just due to my injury and that setback. But Cornell is one of the schools that stuck with me through my recovery process. So that taught me a lot about having toughness and just stick-to-itiveness, if that's a word. I learned just a lot about how tough I am and what hard work is, and I really no longer took my athletic ability for granted. When something's taken away that you love, and I love the game of basketball, it really shifted my focus and perspective. So that was a big moment for me. And then second, I would say at Cornell University, my freshman year, we were 3-22. And anyone with any kind of competitive drive knows that is no good. I had a rough transition. And by the time, though, that I arrived at my senior year, we took that record from 3-22 to 22-3. And we won our first ever Ivy League championship and went to the NCAA Tournament, where I played against players I work with now, Maya Moore, Tina Charles. We played the Connecticut Huskies. So that was quite like a full circle moment for me at Cornell, and one of my favorite moments.
Both of those moments sound like they made a lasting impact on who you are and the work that you do. To be injured in a really high stakes AAU game and to bounce back from that, it's really tough. What made you continue to go on after your injury, and how long was your recovery?
This might sound a little silly, but I don't know if you, I'm sure you are familiar with it. My favorite movie of all time is Love and Basketball.
Yes.
And when I was a little girl, I would watch that show, and Sanaa Lathan, who plays Monica, right, in that movie, I so identified with her character. At that time, when I broke my leg in high school, I watched that movie over and over and over the rest of the summer, and I was so inspired by how they captured, her work ethic and how she was so focused on her recovery and then the possibility for what's to come. That was like my vision at that moment when I was little. That's what motivated me. And so then to answer your second question, repeat your second question for me because I got so excited thinking about
every girl wanted to be Monica. Every young baller wanted to be Monica, right? And so I get that, why that's exciting. The second part of the question is, how did you bounce back from the injury?
Got it.
What was your rehab regimen like?
Yeah. Okay. So that I have to credit the people around me. Mm-hmm. My coaching staff, shout out to Phil Stinney at St. Isabel Field in Charlottesville. He was an incredible support all the way throughout. I mean, the moments that I didn't think that I could do it anymore, he just was always telling me about what's possible, just positive reinforcement. And then secondly, internally, I had a goal. I had a goal that I wanted to meet. And it wasn't something new. It wasn't something flighty. It's something like really that just lives deep in the pit of my stomach. I had something to prove for myself. And there was nothing that could deter me from, making one last attempt at it. I've seen a lot of great examples of athletes that have come back from injury. And the timeline for that was like 9 to 12 months. It was definitely at least a full year recovery before I was back up to speed. But I was motivated by what I still could accomplish. There was so much left undone, so much unfinished business. That was my motivating factor every single day.
Having that goal in mind and being able to see that vision definitely makes a difference and gives you that extra push when times get hard through recovery. There are a lot of athletes now. We're in July, so it's AAU season. What's some advice for those young women who are out there now playing and hoping to catch the eye of college recruiters?
I think it's not necessarily. I always tell, younger players this. It is not about what the recruiters are doing. If you're out there and you're playing and you are so worried about who's in the stands, you're distracted. It's about what you're doing on the floor and what you're capable of. That has to be your focus, and that will speak for itself. But I would say the most important thing you can do is get out there, number one, and play and show that you are multidimensional, right? Like, a lot of coaches, they come to look at players, and they're interested not in just filling one spot. Not everyone needs a two-guard on their team. Not everyone needs, the best three-point shooter. They're looking for people with diverse skill sets that can fit into their system. You want someone that can score. You want someone that might be a really, really good rebounder. Every team needs a really strong defender. So figure out what your strengths are and try to, really maximize those, but know that you got to show that you can work with your teammates. It's not just about you. So players that come to these tournaments and are concerned about throwing up 40, well, that's nice. That number looks good. But my question is, did you play any defense? How many points did you give up? And how many times did someone score on you? So I think you kind of have to keep a well-rounded perspective and understand that it's more than just about scoring buckets.
That's such a great point, because there's a lot of fixation on me, like the person, and not necessarily the team, and how do we create opportunities for other people in addition to us putting in the work ourselves as the players putting in the work.
Exactly. You look at the model of basketball now, Angie, and, teams like the Spurs and the Golden State Warriors, it's all about sharing the basketball and how you fit into a system. And there's so many different critical pieces. There are scorers, but like we said before, there are rebounders, there's passers, there's vocal leaders. There's people that just literally hustle and do everything they can to get loose balls and help change possession. So everyone has a role, and just understanding that it is not just about scoring. It is so much more than that. And I want younger players in the game to keep that in mind.
That's so key. And it sounds like, when you talked about your second greatest moment, going from, was it 3 and 23 to 23 and 3?
Yeah, I call it worst to first.
Right.
Worst to first.
You had to have a team, your team had to have all those different roles and different leaders. How was your team able to do that over the course of 4 years? What were some keys to the transition or to the change?
I would say sacrificing and becoming selfless. I have to share that my freshman year, I had played probably the most minutes on my team, I believe, that year. And throughout the course of my year, I was a starter. I was the first person off the bench. I was the last person off the bench. I did whatever it was necessary for my team to do. I have filled and played every role in my time in playing Cornell basketball. And that's significant because after my first year and not getting as much playing time my second year, it is a tough transition. But you have to understand and realize there are so many different moving pieces and parts on a team. And so your job is to be a good teammate, but to show up and do the best that you are capable of doing every single day. Figuring out what makes you special and what your team needs, and figuring out that match and maximizing that is what creates a championship team. So for me, being able to sacrifice what everyone else might look at as like the most important thing, playing time or usage rate and having the ball in my hands and being the decision maker, I gave that up because we had some other pieces and parts of the team that could do some other things even better than I could. And I had to find other ways to contribute. So you got to be willing to let go of something to get something. And I think sacrifice is such a key element, and a lot of people lose sight of that.
They absolutely do. And it's great to hear you say that. And I really hope that young women who are listening understand that, because the transfer rate is increasing, and oftentimes it's due to not playing. It has everything to do with sports. How in your role, when you're seeing players transfer, do you see the same thing and hear the same comments when you're talking to coaches about why players are leaving schools?
I don't get into a whole lot of detail with the coaches about maybe the reasons why players are unhappy, but I would say overall, when I'm out there and I'm scouting and I see players that do not necessarily understand how significant being a good teammate is, and don't really understand how poorly that reflects on an individual, I will say something. I will speak up, or I'll write that and say, hey, I think this is an area for them to work on. Players have to know that coaches want players that can be coached. And there are programs out there, some of your top programs, maybe your UConn, maybe your Baylor, Notre Dame, they can get any player that they want practically, right? They can select some of the top players in the country. But not every coach wants every good player in this country. And you know why? Because not every player is a good fit. I would argue that Gino Auriemma doesn't want every single All-American that's out there. He could probably have a lot of them come to his program, but he wants players that can come and fit into his system and are willing to give of themselves enough to fill the role that's required to make the overall team a success. So when I see players that don't necessarily, or haven't matured to that point, my advice to them would be, like, you have to step back and understand your role and understand that it's more than just about one individual. And as you proceed in your career, as you play more, and as I've been around some of the most elite athletes, Olympic gold medalists, that is a common thing. You have to figure out how to be a good teammate and be selfless.
That selflessness is something that some players have innately, and then others just have to be taught and broken down to the point where they understand the upside of giving to your team. Because for some players, it's not natural, and for others, you can see it immediately when you watch them play.
You absolutely can. I can think of a few players now just off the top of my mind, but they shall remain nameless. But you can see kind of in their transition, it takes them a while to lock in and to get a clue. And once they recognize that, the shift in their game, you see often they take their game up a level, and all of a sudden their team experiences a lot more success. So that's something I just encourage people to take note of earlier.
You've had a lot of winning in your past, from winning 2 state titles, from going to the NCAA Tournament and winning your league. How do you use what you've learned from playing sports throughout your life in your day-to-day role?
Wow. There is a quote, and I'm not really one to quote a lot of times, but I believe it's by Maya Angelou, and it says something to the extent of, when you get something, teach something to someone else. So, like, no, don't just get a gift and hold on to it and be selfish and don't share it. Like, something about each one, teach one. And that resonates with me. So I'm fortunate to have had a lot of, championship experiences. So when I'm around other athletes and or just professionally, other people, I recognize characteristics of a champion. And I think a lot of what I treasure about my, championship journeys has been that I really enjoy the battle. I enjoy the work that's involved. And true champions and people that are really focused on whatever the matter at hand is, they enjoy that process just as much as they enjoy like the victory or achieving whatever it is in the end. So kind of like when I think about my, professional world now and some of my colleagues here, I really try to exemplify selflessness in the work that I do every day. It's not just about me. I'm always trying to figure out how can I help someone else, and what is the hole, and what is the gap, what is the void, and maybe what we're working on. How can I fill it, and how can I be a leader in that? Those are some of the small ways every single day that I try to bring those winning ways into the work that I do. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
And, there are so many correlations between sports and life, but a lot of times athletes struggle with transitioning those into the workforce when they're finished playing. So what are some ways that you've seen athletes struggle, whether it's from college to the workforce or from professionally to the workforce? What are some things that you see that struggle with most?
I think for a lot of athletes, part of the struggle, and I have to say I struggle with this too, is that for 22-ish years of your life, if you play college athletics, your identity has been that of an athlete. Like, that is what you know, that's what you eat, sleep, and breathe all day long. You are an athlete. And a lot of people get caught up as that is their singular form of identity. And I think that a lot of people and other athletes, they have so much more to offer. There's so many more dimensions that they don't even recognize. And it's not until you are forced to transition to do something else that you actually tap into those. And I think that's where a lot of the struggle is. Like, you have to realize, not only, or for me, I'll speak for myself, Megan Hughes Perry, back then just Megan Hughes, is not just a basketball player, but I was a great basketball player, but off the court, I excelled in the classroom. I was interested in marketing. I wasn't a great dancer, but I wanted to learn more about how to dance. I enjoyed public speaking. I had other interests, and I think athletes have to engage those other interests a little bit sooner and look ahead and be honest with themselves about the prospects of professional basketball and how long and how far that might take them post-grad. And then I also think my transition into the professional world was somewhat difficult because as an athlete, you're not used to sitting in one place every single day. Like, I work in an office, and I'll be very honest. The first day I came to work, I'm like, wait, this is what people do all day? I have to be here in this office? Like, when do we get to go outside? And when am I getting my workout in? And that is a mental shift. And it's not that you don't have those other opportunities, but you have to think now, as a professional, your court space, which was your workspace, is now your cubicle, right? Or a your office space, or whatever your work environment is. You have to apply the same mentality that you applied when you got up and went to practice and showed up on time, and by on time you mean early. You have to apply that to your professional setting. It's the same thing. And I think a lot of athletes have to just shift their thinking to help them with that transition.
Megan, everyone who I've asked that question has mentioned they've mentioned the identity shift, but you're the first person to mention that you're sitting all day or that you're in front of a computer or a cubicle all day. And you're right. That is a huge shift. Like, the people sit around in one place and you're not moving, or that's a really big struggle for some. Thank you for bringing that up.
Angie, because absolutely, I don't mean to cut you off. I just get so fired up about this topic because as athletes, you are used to multitasking, right? Especially as student athletes. You don't have a second in your day. You wake up at 6. You might have lift at 6:30 or 6:15 for those of the people that can wake up and get there at that time. And then you go from there to a class. And from class, maybe to a second workout, individual. And then from there, another class and lunch. And then from that, probably to practice. And then after that, maybe a meeting or dinner and whatever else you have on your plate, right? That is a full day. And then when you take those things away, and it's not that you have to do 10 things in one day, but actually you can come to a space where you don't have to leave and you can do 2 of those things where the pace maybe isn't quite as accelerated in the way that you're used to it being. You just kind of have this moment of like, well, what is this? There's definitely an adjustment curve. There's definitely an adjustment curve. And then you try to compensate and figure out ways that you can still, I guess, keep that former pace with other platforms. So for me, it was, okay, I'm in the office, but I still want my workout. So now that workout time, like maybe I'm doing early morning runs. Maybe I'm joining a league after work. There's just other outlets you have to consider that when you first come out of school, you think you'll never consider. But hey, I'm down with Pilates in my living room now. It's okay. You have to embrace other forms of expressing yourself.
You do. You absolutely have to embrace those because you just don't know what's going to happen or how life will be. But you have to be flexible like you had to be, and adaptable like you had to be when you were playing, in college or playing professionally. We have to...
Absolutely. I will preach that till the cows come home.
2016 is a pretty historic year for a number of reasons. One, it's the 20th anniversary of the WNBA. So we're going to shift a little bit here. And will you talk about why the 20th anniversary is so important and the future of women's basketball?
I'd be happy to touch base on that. When I think about the WNBA and it being around 20 years, let's be clear, the WNBA is the most successful and longest-standing professional women's league anywhere in the world, not just in the United States, in the world. And to think that we've reached the 20-year mark. 20 years, I mean, I'm 30 now. I'll share that I'm 30. 20 years is young. We are 20 years young. But it's incredible. When I was a younger girl aspiring to play basketball, I remember sitting in my living room and watching the WNBA tip off officially. Right that year, in 1997, when the ball went up, all of a sudden there were new hopes and there were new aspirations for an entire generation of young girls, and that is so powerful. And I'm just really excited to be a part of this new wave of opportunity for women. It speaks volumes, and I think there's still a lot more work to do, but I think it's really significant in saying that, no, it's not a question of is the WNBA here to stay? Are they going to be okay? Yeah, like we are here. We are 20 years strong, and we will just continue to keep climbing.
I love how the mantras from the very first year, which is ingrained in all of our minds, the "We Got Next," started, and now it's "Watch Me Work," right? So to go from the first one to now, I love that. And those are kind of the battle cries of women's basketball players. It's we're here, and now it's, take notice and watch us put in the work. I think that's so awesome.
Yeah, that was a campaign that our marketing department came up with, and I think it really speaks to where we are in the growth of this league, and it's a call to action, right?
Exactly.
It's watch me work, it's watch me do the work that I do, but it's also come and join us, come in the arena, see us. And I think an area where the WNBA, we have to continue to grow is young girls and females have to just support each other, And so watch me work isn't just a call out to the guys, come watch us and respect our game. We want that too. However, hey ladies, those of you that love the Skylar Diggins and Elena Deladons and Tamika Catchings and Swing Cash, all of those players in our league, the Brittany Griners, I could go on and on.
Right.
Well, let's get in the gym and let's support them. Let's watch them do their thing, if you want to be the best at something, you got to come in and watch the very best do it, right? That's what we do in every other space. So that's more also a call to action to come in and experience this game. It's beautiful. It's fun.
Yeah, it is pretty, it's so important, though, to have the support from young women and have young women engaged in the game and with the league. We had, recently, there was the passing of Pat Summitt. And, when you talk about the 20th anniversary of the WNBA, all the great players that came from Tennessee, all the women that came from that era, what did Pat Summitt mean to women's basketball, but sports in general? From your perspective?
Oh, wow. I don't even know if I can capture that in just a few words. However, Pat Summitt laid the foundation. Pat Summitt provided a platform for women at the time that I was younger. I mean, she inspired me. She set a mark for what is the very best, right? At that time, it was the very best in women's college basketball. And she set a standard, and everyone else rallied around her. And a lot of young girls worked very hard to try to meet that standard. And I think, we're growing now from where Pat left the game. We're going to try to take it even higher. But I think what was so important about Pat is that she really set a mark for, where women's basketball can be. Pat Summitt, we saw a lot of what she did on the court, right? We know that glare, those blue eyes, that mean stare that everyone knows about Pat, but her work off the court, her fight for games to be on television, for people to see the product of the fruit of her labor and her colleagues' labor, I mean, that is significant. So if it weren't for Pat Summitt, there are a lot of spaces that we find women's basketball in today, and it would not be there if it was not for just her push and her fight and her passion, just literally her passion for the game.
Megan, you bring up such a great point about Pat's fight off the court with women's basketball getting media attention, because during the 2000s, late 90s, we began to see a lot more women. I still have tapes. I'm aging myself. I have tapes of UConn versus Tennessee or LSU or La Tech versus Tennessee because I could record it, right? And so that was huge. You're so right about that. That was huge for us. And
the same.
No, you can go ahead.
I can tell you it's the same. I was going to say it's the same for me. I remember being you know, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, younger, but I would pop in those very same tapes, and I would rewatch games. And Tennessee, UConn, like, that was the place to be. I remember spending all of Saturday afternoon, like, prepping to watch the game. And those moments when the game was actually on, I was locked in. Pat Summitt and, you know, the rivalry that the program had with UConn, other top programs at the time, that created like a destination for women's college basketball. And it was just something that's so magical, and it laid that important piece now. It's like a launching pad for college basketball today and for the WNBA. So I could go on and on and on, but I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you and how significant she was to our game.
Yeah, she was, absolutely. And, you know, we find ourselves in 2016 also in an Olympic year. And there are players who are on this Olympic team who are going for the gold in Rio. Are you going to Rio?
I will not be in Rio, but I will be supporting from a distance.
Yes, same here. What's your analysis of this team? And how do you think, well, obviously the goal is to win gold, but what's your thoughts about the team that we have put together?
You know, I think that this is one of the toughest teams to make, okay? Like, there could be a USA Basketball A, B, and C team, in my opinion, and all three of them could probably take home gold. So there's just so much talent at such a high level and so many interchangeable pieces and parts. I think it's so difficult. The hardest job would probably be to be on that selection committee. But I think that we have an outstanding group of women to represent the United States of America. I'm excited to see some of, you know, our more seasoned, I guess, players I call them. I won't say old players, but our seasoned players. Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, Tamika Catchings. You know, this could possibly be one of their last runs. And I'm just excited to see how they have matured over the course of their careers and how they're going to lead this team to a gold medal. I mean, they're going for their 6th consecutive gold medal. That is humongous. I mean, this team is so dominant. And to watch them and the foundation they've laid for new players now, like Elena Deladon, and seeing her growth and her development, and Brittany Griner, like, for them to, you know, now kind of carry on the torch and be learning from the more seasoned players on the Olympic level, it's just so much fun to watch. I'm really excited about just, like, the evolution of the game.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's so exciting, and I think that having the media coverage really helps. But just having more women playing and more opportunities for women to play makes a difference for young girls who are coming up. And then having opportunities, once they're finished playing, to step into other careers and think about other ways to leverage that athletic identity will just make a tremendous difference. Megan, if someone wants to learn a little bit more about your work and what you do, how can people reach you?
Oh, well, thank you for asking that question. It's great. So I can be reached. Follow me on Twitter first. I'm very accessible and try to be pretty active. I'm at MissMegs42, MISSMEGS 42. And check out my website. It's Megan Hughes Perry, and I can share -67s2.squarespace.com. That's where you can find me, but a lot of it's posted in my Twitter bio, so I would say just go there. You can find out all about the things that I'm involved in here, you know, at the league office, and then some of my sports broadcasting work. I recently hosted an event with Ithaca College, so I'm out there in the college landscape as well as covering the professional side of the game. So I would say follow me on Twitter.
Perfect. Megan, thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to working with you more in the future as we continue to support women's basketball.
Thank you, Angie. It was a pleasure.
This is Athletes as Educators.
Thank you for listening to the Athletes as Educators podcast. Connect with me through the Athletes as Educators Facebook page or at Athletes Educate on Instagram. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and go over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. For more resources and information about today's podcast, you can check us out at AngelaRLewis.com.